As far as I can remember, R.K. Naik always commenced any task with the following: Om Shri Ganganeshaya Namaha. My father, Ramanbhai Khandubai Naik, also known as Kekre among the Indian community and Mashlangu among his beloved freedom-fighting comrades, was a unique man unto himself. Ever since I can recall, he was generally told by many that charity begins at home. This was in reference to his activities in serving humanity. Little did all these people realize that for my dad, charity did begin at home, as the whole world was his oyster. We, his immediate family, could not claim him as ours alone. He was daddy to all young and old. My father was a human being larger than life. From my innocent eyes, at the age of 5 years, I witnessed and began to realize that he was no normal daddy. He was always in consultation with someone or the other, listening to their grievances and helping them out. He conducted many private meetings with important people and would be absent from our lives for weeks and sometimes months on end. As we grew up, my siblings and I realized that my father was not just ours, but was for the people of all color, creed, religion, and nationality. He was a human being larger than life. He touched people's lives in such a way that they felt safe and reassured that if anything ever happened or if there was ever any problem in their lives, he would be the one to help them. He was a mentor and educator who positively influenced and shaped the lives of many of the youth of Rhodesia.
This is the extraordinary true story of a man known to many simply as R.K. Ramanbhai Khandubai Naik. It was a chilly Tuesday morning in Harrow, London. The temperature hovered around 16 degrees, with a sharp wind sweeping through the quiet streets. At exactly 5:30 a.m., the daily newspaper, a copy of the UK Guardian, was delivered to the doorstep of a modest house. The home belonged to Don K. Naik, a former nationalist from the days of the National Democratic Party, NDP, and a close companion of R.K. Naik during their shared years in the struggle for liberation. That morning's Guardian, a London paper which had a circulation of over 100,000, carried something deeply personal, an obituary written by Don himself. It began with these words:
"My friend R.K. Naik, who died aged 81, was the only Indian to have served as a member of the Central Committee of the Zimbabwe African People's Union. The resistance movement began in then southern Rhodesia in 1961. Throughout his involvement in the struggle, RK remained focused on the ultimate objective: independence for his country.
In this series, we explore the life of an unsung hero, a man remembered by few, yet deserving of much more. He was not declared a national hero, nor was he celebrated as a provincial hero. In April 1980, RK Naik was offered a seat in Parliament, a recognition of his tireless work during the liberation struggle. He declined the offer. RK explained his decision simply,
"The main aim of my activities was on humanitarian grounds, to free the oppressed and gain freedom for Zimbabwe, not to secure a government position."
It was also during this period that he made a quiet promise to his wife, Surakaban, that the years ahead would belong to their family. To this day, Yogesh believes RK would have made an exceptional High Commissioner to India, but history had other plans. During these conversations, Don would often reflect on RK's admiration for Sarojini Naidu, the Indian poet, author, and freedom fighter born in 1879. Her spirit left a lasting impression on RK, especially her ideas on race, empire, and women. This admiration found its way into the community as well. The Bulawayo Indian Group, publishers of the Lotus newsletters, once highlighted a moment from nearly a century ago, February 28, 1924, when Sarojini Naidu, a 4-foot 10-inch woman of color, delivered a fiery speech at Wanderers Hall in South Africa.
"We conquer, we rule, we trample down, we make graveyards where there were gardens. We rule with the iron heel. We flash the sword and daze the eyes of those who look us in the face."
RK never forgot those words. They stayed with him, a vivid echo of a voice far ahead of its time. RK, Ramanbai Kandubai Naik, was born in Bulawayo, southern Rhodesia, on September 19, 1927. Like many early Gujarati settlers, his parents had migrated from South Gujarat, India, in search of opportunity. Tragedy struck early. When Ramanbai was just 3 years old, his father passed away unexpectedly while on a short visit to India, and this loss would mark the first major tragedy of his life. RK had an elder sister, Santa, and a younger brother, Daulat, who tragically passed away at just 18 years of age. Another early hardship in RK's life was the loss of his mother, Maybeen, when he was only 9 years old. After her passing, RK and his siblings were raised by their uncle, Vasanji K. Naik. Despite this, the family chose to stay in southern Rhodesia, and later, Ramanbai was sent to India, where he completed his matriculation in Gujarat. His father's roots traced back to the town of Bilimora, nestled on the banks of the Ambika River, close to Navsari. At the time, Bilimora was part of the Surat district and historically significant. Once a vital port city in the 18th century, home to a fleet of 50 British Empire vessels. When RK was born, Howard Unwin Moffat was serving as the Prime Minister of Southern Rhodesia, a position he held from 1927 to 1933. Moffat had stepped into the role reluctantly, following the sudden death of his predecessor, Charles Coughlin, who succumbed to a cerebral hemorrhage. Interestingly, Moffat was unpopular among the local white settler population, largely because of his sympathetic stance towards black Africans. Despite his personal views, Moffat was pressured into passing the infamous Land Apportionment Act of 1930, a law that would remain highly contested well into Zimbabwe's post-independence era after April 1980. One of the most vivid recollections of RK's early years comes from Rameshbhai Arvashi, who lived in Bulawayo during the Southern Rhodesia era and is now retired in New Jersey, USA. Rameshbhai Arvashi recalled the early days with RK Naik.
I first met my cousin RK in Bulawayo when he returned from India to take over his late father's retail shop. It was located near the railway station zone, which was a hub for Indian traders. After a few years, I got to know my uncle better. What stood out immediately was that he was fearless, outspoken, and deeply compassionate, especially toward the handicapped and poor local Africans.
Another voice from that era is Amratbhai B. Naik of Gwanda, who reflected on their youthful days together.
I remember our early years, specifically in 1946, when RK and I were still young men. At the time, we both worked for a retail store and even shared a bedroom. RK was about 3 years older than me. I admired him not just because we were related, but because he showed great maturity at a young age and had a solid grasp of the political issues affecting both Southern Rhodesia and India, from where we had recently arrived. Before bed each night, we would talk about the problems facing the Asian community. Of course, he did most of the talking, and I did most of the listening.
These memories reveal a young RK who was not only socially aware, but also already committed to understanding the bigger picture, the world around him, the systems of power, and the role of the Indian community in shaping a future within Southern Rhodesia. RK Naik was always deeply passionate about engaging with youth, both within the Indian community and the political party structures he supported. In 1974 and 1975, RK served as a member of the Executive Management Committee for 2 major youth leadership camps in Bulawayo. He also sat on the board of the Swami Krishnananda Foundation, an organization that played a key role in spiritual and leadership development. These camps brought together participants from all over the country, especially from the Gujarati community. The camp director was Mr. J.B. Rampal, the respected headmaster of Robert Treadgold Primary School. The deputy camp leader at the time was an 18-year-old Yogesh Naik, now our series producer. During one of the camp sessions, a participant began speaking about the Salt March and Mahatma Gandhi. Yogesh, listening nearby, stepped in to correct the account with remarkable accuracy. RK, who was close by, moved in to listen more carefully. He nodded in agreement with Yogesh's detailed explanation. Yogesh later wrote in his diary that RK was a true follower of Gandhi and that the Salt March was more than just an event to him. It was a lifelong, strategic inspiration.
On the 12th of March 1930, Mohandas Gandhi began the 240-mile, that's 390-kilometre Salt March to the coastal village of Dandi. The Salt March took place just 2 months after the Indian National Congress promulgated the Declaration of the Independence of India, which supported the idea of civil disobedience to achieve complete self-rule. Gandhi chose to focus his protest on the 1882 Salt Act, which placed a government monopoly on the collection and manufacture of salt. Gandhi claimed that, next to air and water, salt is perhaps the greatest necessity of life. He wrote to the Viceroy, Lord Irwin, ahead of his protest in an attempt to negotiate, but the Viceroy refused to meet him. Gandhi and 79 supporters departed his base on the 12th of March and, after 24 days, had built a procession that reportedly stretched for 2 miles. He intended to produce salt from seawater to avoid paying tax, and thus undermine Britain's salt monopoly. After he broke the salt laws by picking up a piece of natural salt at Dundee on the 6th of April, millions of people around the country did the same. Meanwhile, international media coverage of the march brought the issue of Indian independence to a worldwide audience. The British authorities responded by arresting 60,000 people by the end of April. Gandhi himself was jailed on the 5th of May. Despite this reaction, Gandhi only called off the civil disobedience campaign in January 1931. This led to him attending the Round Table Conference in London, where he began to discuss India's demands for independence as an equal negotiating partner.
RK's formal involvement in the freedom struggle began in 1960, right in Bulawayo, southern Rhodesia. That same year, Joshua Nkomo established the National Democratic Party, NDP, a socialist African nationalist movement aimed at achieving greater political rights for the country's black majority. RK joined the NDP immediately. However, within just 9 months, the NDP was banned by the government. The party had operated from January 1960 to December 1961, and though short-lived, laid a critical foundation for future nationalist movements. Here is rare footage of Nkomo by Agence France Presse in 1960. The footage, captured by Agence France Presse, a Paris-based international news agency, offers a rare glimpse into the early spirit of the liberation movement. During these NDP days, RK maintained regular communication with Amratbhai B. Naik in Gwanda, who had also become a member of the movement. RK often relied on Amratbhai for updates and developments from the region. He also vividly remembered when the NDP received a fleet of Land Rovers and vehicles, donated from Tanzania by Julius K. Nyerere, the anti-colonial activist and political visionary. Nyerere would go on to serve as Prime Minister from 1961 to 1962, and later as President from 1962 to 1985. RK recalled how signwriters were called in to paint the party slogan on each vehicle.
One man, one vote.
It was during these formative NDP years that RK began creating genuine awareness of the liberation movement among the masses. His passion, his clarity of vision, and his ability to connect across racial and cultural lines would mark him as a unique and trusted figure in the years to come. Rameshbhai R. Vashi of Bulawayo recalls RK during the NDP days.
Very quickly, RK had won the respect of African leaders and the grassroots members of the National Democratic Party, NDP.
His sincerity, humility, and clarity of purpose earned him the trust of the movement, and soon he was nominated as one of the executive members of the party. He was not alone. A number of Gujarati Indians played pivotal roles in the NDP. Among them were the late Haribhai M. Naik, who served as Bulawayo branch treasurer, Amratbhai B. Naik from Gwanda, Don K. Naik, and Natubhai Muni from Bulawayo, and Amratbhai V. Desai. In Salisbury, the late Sumant Mehta and Professor Hasu Patel also stood out as key figures. RK would often reflect on a dark day in September 1960 when gunfire was opened on an NDP crowd in Bulawayo. 11 party supporters were killed. It was a moment of shock and sorrow, etched into his memory forever. On December 17, 1961, a new chapter began in the fight for liberation. Joshua Nkomo formed the Zimbabwe African People's Union, ZAPU, a militant socialist organization. ZAPU was committed to one uncompromising goal: majority rule. RK Naik joined ZAPU immediately. and he stayed with the party, without pause, for nearly 2 decades, from 1961 until March 1980. ZAPU was the first political organization in southern Rhodesia to bring together a truly united national base, transcending tribes, regions, and backgrounds, to demand full independence and equality. Its stance was clear: no compromise on racial justice. Over time, RK was appointed to ZAPU's Central Committee, its highest political executive organ. Don K. Naik reflects on that decision.
He was invited to the Central Committee not because of politics alone, but because of who he was. His loyalty was unquestionable, his honesty was rare, and he had a gift. He could connect with anyone, explaining even the most radical ideas in calm, simple, and non-threatening ways. He lived by Gandhian principles, but when the Liberation War broke out, even RK became convinced that armed struggle was the only option left.
That armed struggle was waged by ZIPRA, the Zimbabwe People's Revolutionary Army, the military wing ZAPU, founded by Jason Z. Moyo and Lookout Masuku. Unlike other factions, ZIPRA was backed by the Soviet Union and drew inspiration from anti-colonial struggles around the world. And RK, a Gujarati son of Bulawayo, was right there in the heart of it all. Quiet, focused, principled, and unwavering. In the days of entrenched racial segregation in southern Rhodesia, Bulawayo's newly built drive-in cinema symbolized yet another space reserved solely for whites or Europeans. But on opening day, that status quo was quietly, cleverly challenged. RK Naik orchestrated a peaceful, Gandhian-style protest, an act of civil disobedience that would ripple through the community. We turn now to an eyewitness account by Rameshbhai R. Vashi, who recalls,
RK organized the protest at this new drive-in cinema just outside the city. We all arrived in separate cars. The whole concept, watching a movie from within our own cars, felt like a novel and exciting adventure. Being opening day, hundreds of cars had turned up. The traffic flowed out from the cinema entrance and onto the main road, easily stretching half a mile. We had positioned our cars among the early ones in line. When the first few vehicles, ours, reached the ticketing booth, it became immediately clear that non-whites were not going to be admitted. That was the policy, but instead of leaving, we held our ground. One by one, the cars in our protest group refused to move, blocking the flow of traffic into the venue. The situation escalated quickly and management called the police. RK and the others calmly explained to the officers that if non-whites were not to be admitted, this information should have been made clear in advance. Surprisingly, the police agreed. We were allowed entry and the screening had to be delayed. It was a small yet powerful victory for us and for all who saw the value in equality. Sadly, black Africans were still excluded from entry, but the seed of protest had been planted.
The Boswell Wilkie Circus, a South African family-run entertainment troupe, had been touring since 1913, performing across southern Rhodesia each year. Jim, Walter, and Alf did the tumbling acts, while Walter and Alf were the clowns. Its shows, however, mirrored the times, whites-only audiences. Once again, RK and his protest group took action. This time, they traveled from Bulawayo to Gwelo to peacefully challenge the segregation. Rameshbhai R. Vashi continues.
We stood outside the circus with protest boards, peacefully demonstrating against the exclusion of non-whites. I don't recall whether the police were called or if there was any direct confrontation. I also don't remember whether we won in a formal sense. What I do remember is this: our protest did not go unnoticed. Passers-by watched. People took note. And although we weren't able to block access like we had at the drive-in cinema, our presence was meaningful. We left Gwelo that evening around 5 p.m., returning to Bulawayo without incident and without tangible results. But looking back, that quiet persistence mattered. Change often begins with being seen.
These were not mere protests, they were powerful acts of conscience. R.K. Naik, ever inspired by the principles of Mahatma Gandhi, had taken the fight for dignity and equality to the public stage in simple, strategic ways. This was R.K., a strategist, a visionary, and above all, a believer in the transformative power of peaceful resistance. In 1964, R.K. Naik was served with a restriction order confining him to his home in the railway station area of Bulawayo. Since the enactment of the Law and Order Maintenance Act in 1960, the Minister of Justice had been empowered under Sections 50 and 52 to define the area within which an individual could legally reside. This was known as a restriction order. R.K. described this period vividly.
I was not allowed to go to Vashi Hall. Since it was the Indian Cultural Center, I could no longer attend Hindu clubs, lectures, weddings, or religious ceremonies. I was also forbidden from entering African townships or even crossing the road. On top of that, I had to report to the police station every single day.
This marked the beginning of what he described as his Gandhi-style in and out of prison chapter. Later that year, R.K. received a more severe order, full detention. He was transferred to Gwelo, modern-day Gweru, for 90 days, held at the infamous Wawa Detention Center. According to Jocelyn Alexander's Nationalism and Self-Government in Rhodesia, 1964 to 1974, Wawa had strict routines, observation towers, and high-security cells where many political detainees were held. Before delving into the political dynamics of the Gonakudzingwa Detention Center, it's essential to understand the harsh environment that surrounded it. Located deep in the Chiredzi district of Masvingo province, Gonakudzingwa bordered the vast Gonarejo National Park, a renowned game reserve both within southern Rhodesia and internationally.
This is Gonarejo National Park. How's it guys, I'm Gus, the African Plant Hunter. This is part 1 in my Into the Wild Zimbabwe series on Gonarejo. Gonarejo at 5,000 square kilometers is the second largest park in Zimbabwe. Situated in the southeast, it's part of a transfrontier conservation project between Zimbabwe, Mozambique and South Africa. It's probably best known, the name Gonarejo, meaning place of the elephants, probably best known for its elephant population. This park has over 2 elephants per square kilometer, so you are absolutely guaranteed if you visit to see at least 1 elephant.
The detention center itself was established in April 1964 and became a symbolic site of resistance, where many stories of defiance, sacrifice, and nation building were forged. Detainees often recounted hearing elephants at night and watching lions roam freely outside their barracks. ZAPU member Lankart Gumpo, one of the many political detainees, described it.
We were all men in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by wild animals of every kind. But we weren't afraid. We learned how to live among the lions. There was so much game that the lions weren't even interested in us.
R.K. Naik's first night at the camp was a chilling experience. Because of his race, he was separated from other detainees and brought to the camp alone at around 8 p.m.
It was pitch dark when I arrived. There were 2 round tin huts with a single window. One of them was empty. I was hungry, tired and alone, with only a white CID officer and a black policeman. The police handed me a rolled blanket and left. Furious, I shouted, "How do you expect me to light a lamp here? Don't forget, after liberation, we will treat you twice as badly as you treat us now." The African policeman lit the lamp and gave me 3 matches. No matchbox allowed. I laid a blanket on the floor and tried to rest. The only food was dry bread, milk powder, and sugar. No knife for the bread. Tea was served. The toilet and bath had no doors. I learned later that the other black detainees were held about 2 kilometers away.
At the time, ZAPU leader Joshua Nkomo was unaware of RK's presence at the camp. The next morning, when he was informed, he was furious at the authorities.
Don't you have any sense? What if wild animals had taken him? He's our colleague.
In response, Nkomo immediately sent 2 officers to headquarters to protest RK's treatment. Soon, RK was moved to a safer part of the camp and placed closer to fellow Indian detainees. Though isolated and harsh, the camp became a hub of intellectual and political exchange. Rameshbhai R. Vashi, a relative to RK, recalled those difficult days. Relatives were allowed to visit, and there was freedom of movement between the Indian and African sections of the camp. While RK was detained, R.R. Vashi and his wife assisted his family. His wife managed their retail store, while Pushpaban Vashi helped care for their children. While RK was imprisoned in Gonakudzingwa detention camp, his son Tushar was born. In a gesture of solidarity and affection, his comrades in the camp affectionately nicknamed the newborn Gona. Inside the camp, the political discourse never stopped.
Every day brought deep discussion, ideas, strategies, even arguments. But by nightfall, we always found common ground.
RK remembered, Joshua Nkomo mentored many, including RK, during these years.
He told me, when you're released, Zipra will come to you for help. You must help where you can.
After 2 long years in detention at Gonakudzingwa, RK was quietly removed under the cover of night. Escorted in a special military jeep, he was told he was being transferred to Salisbury, where he would stand trial for acts of treason. RK Naik's journey from home restriction in Bulawayo to political detention in the wilderness of southern Rhodesia is a story of perseverance, leadership, and an unwavering commitment to justice. His time at Gonakudzingwa stands as a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the sacrifices made in the long road toward independence. In November 1978, RK Naik made a pivotal visit to India on behalf of the ZAPU Central Committee. This wasn't just a diplomatic journey. It was a moment of reconnection, solidarity, and advocacy on a global scale. During this trip, RK met with Indian Prime Minister Morarji Desai in New Delhi, along with other senior members of the ruling Janata Party. His mission was to establish solidarity links between the Indian government and Zimbabwe's liberation movement. While researching this chapter, Yogesh Naik recalled an interview that RK gave to India Today during that very trip. Digging through his old files from Bombay, he rediscovered the article, RK Naik, Man from Zimbabwe, published on 30th November 1978. Here's an excerpt from that historic interview.
What brings you to India?
I was one of 4 delegates from Zimbabwe attending the World Peace Council against Apartheid and the Liberation of Africa held in Delhi. I'm also here to hold talks with the Indian government regarding liberation support.
Didn't you also come to raise awareness about Zimbabwe and collect funds, particularly during your trip to Gujarat?
Yes, I went to Gujarat because my family originally comes from there. I was born in Zimbabwe but lost my parents at a young age. I came to India as a child and was brought up by my uncle. I returned to Zimbabwe in 1946. Like many Indians there, I started in the retail trade. I had a small textile shop, but I gave it up to work full-time with ZAPU in the struggle for Zimbabwe's liberation.
With the collapse of the internal settlement, the guerrillas clearly have the upper hand. When does the Patriotic Front expect to liberate Zimbabwe?
Any day now, we will march into Salisbury. We can move in at any time.
What's stopping you?
We would be bombarded from 4 sides. Zimbabwe would be destroyed. Botswana is a small state without an army of its own. And remember, power will not be taken from Smith. It must be taken from Britain. Smith is just an instrument. He's not the colonizer. He is a settler.
This interview remains a rare and valuable glimpse into the international face of Zimbabwe's liberation through the voice of an Indian Gujarati activist born in Africa, speaking with defiance and clarity on the global stage. From 1977 to 1980, Ramanbai K. Naik lived in exile in Botswana, first in Francistown and later in Gaborone, without a permit. Later he was granted a special permit by the Office of the President. During this period, RK served as a critical link between his ZAPU colleagues in Zambia and other countries sympathetic to the nationalist cause. At this point, it is important to make clear that when RK was being transferred from Gonakudzingwa to Salisbury to be tried for treason, he managed to jump from the train headed to Salisbury onto a train headed for Francistown, Botswana in a daring escape. RK described his first journey into exile.
I was very uncomfortable.
RK recalled,
At the second stop, the real checking began.
At that point, he made a split-second decision. He left his suitcase with a Mrs. Patel he had met on the train and disembarked. He let the train go and started walking the remaining 50 kilometers to Francistown. Upon arrival, RK surrendered himself at the police station as a political refugee. The local police contacted headquarters for instructions and eventually transported him in a van to the CID in Francistown. There, RK introduced himself and stated simply,
I belong to ZAPU.
From Francistown, he later moved to Gaborone.
The one thing that I love about my city is the culture of walking into a space and being greeted or greeting and getting feedback. It kind of like makes it warm and it kind of like validates you, you know, whenever you walk into a space and then someone smells it like Dumela Ra or Dumela Ma. For me, that's like the highlight of this city, because you don't get, I don't get that when I go to Joburg. I hardly get it when I go to other cities in Africa, but here it's quite nice to just walk into a space and then hear someone say.
Upon arriving in Gaborone, RK spent 10 difficult days with almost nothing to eat, sleeping on benches in the streets. Eventually, he found refuge with an Indian couple, Ramachandran and his wife, Saroja, who gave him shelter for over 2 years. During his time in Gaborone, RK kept a low profile. He supported himself by working at a filling station, pumping petrol for customers. He later embarked on his first business venture, manufacturing cement bricks, which he gradually expanded into a larger operation. Later, he extended his business operations to Johannesburg, where he would eventually retire. In Johannesburg, RK devoted more time to his wife and grandchildren, a commitment he referred to as repaying a debt for the years of separation and sacrifice.
A promise I had made,
he said,
and a promise I kept.
Behind every remarkable man stands an equally remarkable woman. For nearly 5 decades, Mrs. Surakaban Ramanbhai Naik was RK's unwavering companion and partner in life. Today, she resides in Johannesburg with her son Jignesh, his wife, and their children. Her eldest daughter, Sashikala, also lives nearby with her family. Surakaban lived through extraordinarily challenging times. While RK was detained, imprisoned, or deeply immersed in evening ZAPU political activities, she managed everything at home in Bulawayo's old railway station zone. She raised the children, maintained the household, and ran their retail shop. Often, without help, rest, or reprieve, the constant anxiety of unexpected police knocks at odd hours and the fearsome raids on their home and business would have overwhelmed many. But Surakaban endured it all with quiet strength and relentless grace. Through those years, she developed a deep well of courage, resilience, and faith. Her story is not just one of survival, but of steadfast support and heroic endurance. In many cultures, including early Gujarati immigrant communities, the wife was often expected to play a subordinate role. Surakaban arrived in Bulawayo in 1956 with hopes of a better life, more freedom, and new opportunities in Africa. What she found was a life of trials, but also one of purpose and profound strength. Yogesh Naik, our series producer, born in 1956, came to know the Naik family well over the years. His father had close ties with RK during the NDP days, and his mother, Sumitraben, shared a warm friendship with Surekaki. Yogesh remembers Surakaban for her simplicity, kindness, and the respectful, gentle way she carried herself. From his primary school to high school days, he saw in her the strength of a true matriarch, dedicated and selfless to the very end. A smile, he says, is unforgettable. Don K. Naik recalls,
Surakaban would be feeding 15 people at a time to support our newsletter meetings at her home, but no alcohol was ever served, out of respect for RK's Gandhian values.
Natubai Muni added,
Our family bonds continued to grow. When both of us had children, they would be in and out of each other's homes every day.
when RK served as chairman of the Gujarati school in Bulawayo, he and Surakaban made history as the first Gujarati couple to act in a stage play together. A symbolic and real partnership in life and community. So let us never forget the legacy of our first Gujarati heroine. Mother, wife, and pillar of resilience. Surakaban's life reminds us that courage is often quiet, rooted in love, and lived out every single day. Her story deserves recognition not only for her strength, but for the emotional toll she endured. Because sometimes the knock at the door is more terrifying than death itself.
Every life that has walked a path of purpose leaves behind echoes that are carried in the hearts of those they touched. For R.K. Naik, these echoes are not just memories, they are inspirations. His unwavering dedication, fearless principles, and quiet sacrifices shape communities, families, and futures. In this section, we hear from those who walked beside him, learned from him, and loved him. From fellow activists to family members, each voice a piece of the larger story of a man who gave more than he ever asked for. These are the tributes to a leader, a brother, a friend, a husband, and a father.
My father, R.K. Naik, was a unique man unto himself. My father was a human being larger than life. From my innocent eyes, as early as 5 years, I witnessed and realized that he was no normal daddy. As we grew up as siblings, I realized that my father was not just ours, but was for the people of all color, creed, religion, and nationality. He was indeed a human being larger than life. His determination, willpower, and spiritual conviction was such that he never gave up. RK starts where everyone else stops.
Throughout his involvement in the struggle, RK remained focused on the ultimate objective of independence and majority rule for southern Rhodesia. In doing so, you sacrificed the closeness your wife, Surakaban, and your children, Shashikala, Shaila, Raksha, Tushar, and Jignesh, were entitled to. You gave your life to the country, and in doing so, you gave up precious time with your family.
Such a wonderful man who stood by his principles, no matter who he might antagonize or whose toes he might tread on. During his time in Bulawayo, he often had to challenge the conservative community leadership. He never gave up his values. If I had read his life story without knowing him personally, I would still say he is a great son of Zimbabwe and certainly the greatest among the Asian community. His selfless sacrifices for Zimbabwe will remain a source of inspiration and pride for generations to come.
Raman Bhai, I bow and salute you for transforming a timid young lad who lacked self-confidence into a mature, outspoken man full of boldness and self-assurance. I owe my growth, maturity, and character to you.
As the struggle against minority rule intensified, RK remained openly involved in its affairs, while many of us stayed in the background, supporting families of those in detention. During RK's repeated interrogations and harassment by the Central Intelligence Department, his family was often left in the dark about his whereabouts. They survived with the help and support of relatives and friends.
RK was one of us in the struggle. He had an open hand. We didn't have cars or even bank accounts before support came from the Asian community. And RK was among those who advised us, stood with us, and offered material help. Because of that, he was one of us. That's why we called him Mahlangu.
My father's principles were rooted in the belief that people of all races should work together.
RK, on your 75th birthday, I want to say how deeply you inspired us. You made us reflect critically on our roles within the family, the community, society, and our country. To you, Comrade Naik, the cause of the country always came first. You should be proud.
RK Naik was living in Gaborone, Botswana, as the moment of Zimbabwe's independence approached. On the 16th of April, he arrived in Salisbury, soon to be known as Harare, having travelled all the way from Botswana for the historic occasion. On the 17th, the city of Salisbury buzzed with anticipation. His old friends from NDP, ZAPU and ZANU were also preparing for the big day. Amratbhai B. Naik, who had come from Gwanda, settled in at M.K. Desai's home. Sumant Mehta smiled at his wife in their Milton Park house, adjusting his jacket and noting that his black shoes could use polish. Near the University of Rhodesia housing area, Professor Hasu Patel sipped a hot cup of tea, closing his eyes and smiling as he pictured the new flag of Zimbabwe. They arrived 2 hours early at Rufaro Stadium, not for a football match, but for the birth of a nation. The air was electric. The dream of liberation, so long in the making, had finally arrived. But the weight of history still echoed in the background. Perhaps some remembered the words of Ian Smith.
I don't believe in black majority rule ever in Rhodesia. Not in 1,000 years.
Not in 1,000 years will there be majority rule. And yet, here it was. A new chapter began.
On the 17th of April 1980, going beyond the midnight hour on to 18th April at the popular football stadium Rufaro in Salisbury. Many in the crowd shed tears of joy and pain. That night in April 1980, Zimbabwe became Africa's newest independent country as Britain's Union flag was brought down and replaced by the new flag of Zimbabwe. The two liberation war parties joined forces as ZANU-PF and won the first election with a landslide victory. Robert G. Mugabe became the new Zimbabwe Prime Minister. Also among the 40,000 crowd at the Rufaro Stadium were heads of state from many countries around the world, including Prince Charles of United Kingdom and the Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Later on the next day, Bob Marley agreed to make a second concert for 100,000 crowd from all parts of Zimbabwe. One of Bob Marley's songs read, "So arm in arms, with arms we'll fight the struggle. We're gonna fight, well, we have to fight for our rights."